And welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be looking at UK Home Office skilled worker visa update. This is actually because some people have approached me to ask me what I think about the code 2113, and some people appear confusing, and I think maybe I'm not an immigration lawyer, but maybe I could be able to provide some advice where possible. Anyway, before we continue, my name is Dr. Emmanuel Ogbodo. I'm a biomedical scientist and I'm also a lecturer in biomedical science here in the United Kingdom. Let us look at the overview of what this entails. But before I continue, can I say this, that I'm not an immigration lawyer, and whatever thing I'm saying here is my own opinion, meaning I could be wrong. So every information I'm providing is subject for confirmation, but I believe I have tried to read through the information that Home Office has provided and to think maybe the information I'm going to provide may be reliable, but again is subject to confirmation. So it's my own opinion. Okay, I know that most of the questions I receive has to do with the code 2113, but because this is a presentation, I think I should start up with letting us know that a skilled worker visa allows you to come to or stay in the United Kingdom to do an eligible job with an approved employer. So meaning if you are going to get a skilled worker visa, you are, once you get it, you are allowed to come and stay in the UK and work in the UK. But what it means that your employer must be approved to be able to give you that. Initially, it was not called skilled worker visa. It was mainly known as Tier 2 General Work Visa. So then it changed. So meaning that Tier 2 General Work Visa is now replaced with a skilled worker visa. Now, obviously, this visa also allows you to work in the UK waters, so it's not just on the dry ground, like ground. So you can also work in the water if you are eligible, if you do get sponsored. So yeah, that's also skilled worker visa can also work in the UK waters. Now let us look at eligibility. What can make you eligible to be sponsored as a skilled worker visa? Okay, first of all, let's say that to qualify for a skilled worker visa, you must. So there is some things that must be associated with you, and that must be reflective of you before you can be qualified to get a skilled worker visa. One, you are going to work for a UK employer that has been approved by the Home Office, meaning that you don't just work for everybody. So if somebody is saying that he's going to sponsor you, if an organization is saying that they're going to sponsor you, it is important that you confirm that that organization has been approved by the Home Office to be eligible to sponsor you. Okay. 2, have a certificate of sponsorship from your employer with information about the role you have been offered. So again, if you are going to get a skilled worker visa, you need COS basically, and that COS should give information about the work that you're going to do. I know that I'm making this video because of biomedical scientists, but I felt that I should start with making it generic before then narrowing it to a biomedical scientist position, which is the code that I'm focusing on anyway, is 2113. But again, if you are going to get a skilled worker visa, you need COS, you need sponsorship, and that has to come from an employer that has been approved by Home Office. Do a job that is on the list of eligible occupation, meaning that there are some jobs that are not on the list of eligible occupation. So if you are going to be sponsored, make sure you have double checked on the Home Office website that that job is on the list of occupational list. Okay. Of course, you are going to be paid minimum salary. How much you are going to be paid is dependent on the work that you do and the date you got your COS. Now, can I tell you this? So if you want to find the eligibility, you can then click the link and find out the eligibility. Still on the your job, I'm now going to explain something here. You must meet both the following requirements to be eligible for a skilled worker visa. So your job is eligible for the visa. That means the job you are going to work is eligible for the visa. And you will be working for a UK employer that has been approved by the Home Office. I have said that. Okay. Now, you must also be paid at least either the minimum standard salary rate for the type of work you'll be doing. Now, let me tell you, all the information I have given so far, in most of them, especially when it comes to salary, which is where I'm coming, which is actually the main thing I want to discuss today. This information I'm going to give now, which is the minimum lower salary rate if you have gotten your certificate of sponsorship before 4th of April 2024. That means before 4th of April 2024, the sponsorship is based on the minimum standard salary rate of that work. But that has not changed. Home Office has updated that, and the update from the Home Office is what we're going to be discussing to see how that will, the impact of that in some professions, and how that can be put into consideration when you are looking for a job. Okay. Now, still your job. Now, let's see this. Your minimum standard salary for the type of job, for type of work you'll be doing, is whichever is the higher of. So what I want you to see here is whichever is the higher of. The minimum standard, the minimum standard salary for the type of work you'll be doing is whichever is the higher of. Now, let's see that. Whichever is the higher of 38,700 pounds per year. So what it means is that the minimum standard salary should be 38,700 pounds per year. But it doesn't stop there. And this is where we need to pay attention. He said the minimum standard salary for the type of work you will be doing, the type of work you will be doing. Meaning that you can still get a job that can offer you 38,700 and you are still not eligible. So even though the minimum standard salary is 38,700 pounds a year, however, is dependent on the type of job you'll be doing. So that is important, okay? The going rate, and that is where we now come in. So even though the minimum standard salary is 38,700, you now need to consider the type. What is the going rate? What is the going rate of the type of work you'll be doing? The going rate of the type of work you'll be doing will not determine if you are eligible to be sponsored, even though you've reached the threshold of the 38,700 pounds. Okay? I hope that makes sense. I'm saying this because someone can get 38,700 pounds and still not be eligible. And that is why I'm making this point, because the eligibility is dependent, in addition to the fact that the minimum is 38,700, is dependent on the type of work you are doing. What is the going rate of that work you want to do? Your employer must make sure your job pays at least the minimum wage. Okay, so UK has a national minimum wage, so your employer needs to make sure that is the case and they follow the rules and all of that. Okay, now what is the minimum wage? You can see, obviously, if you are 21 years and above, you've seen the minimum wage. Okay, but that is not really the main thing we are after. Now, what we really want to look at is that minimum standard salary of 38,700, and it dependent on the type of job you want to do. What is the going rate of that job? So I want you to note the three key words. The minimum standard salary, which is what? 38,700. Another one is the type of work you'll be doing. Another one is the going rate. That going rate will determine if you are going to be sponsored or not. Still on the salary requirements, you need to check if your job is eligible. Before you can be able to find out if your job is eligible, it's important that you know the full code, okay? So every job, now the way the Home Office has done it, they didn't just publish the eligibility of getting skilled worker visa as a single document of a code. So what they've done it is that each profession has different code, and that will not determine, okay, the eligibility. And that is where the going rate comes in, the minimum going rate or the higher going rate. And whichever you look at it, you need a minimum of 38,700. Now, what that means is that even though you get a minimum of 38,700, if the going rate of your work, of the type of work you want to do, is higher than the minimum wage, the minimum standard payment, you are not eligible. Now, let me give you the example. You will usually need to be paid the standard salary rate. Usually, that's the standard. You must. Okay, to be sponsored, you must get at least 38,700 pounds per year. Now look at the other one, and this is where I don't want us to miss it. Or the going rate for your job, whichever is higher, So whichever is high here is this. If the going rate of your job, okay, is more than £38,000, even though you get 38, it's more than, if the going rate of your job is more than £38,700 a year, even though you get this £38,700 a year, you are not eligible. Why? Because your going rate is higher. That's why I say whichever is higher. Let's see example, okay? The example is that imagine that your salary, you got a salary of £39,000 a year, but the going rate of the type of job you want to do is for £5,000. Home Office said you do not meet the usual salary requirement for this job. Every information I provided here is the information that exactly it is on the Home Office website. So they are subject to confirmation. What I'm giving is my interpretation of what I think they are trying to communicate. So let's still continue with the salary requirement, because we now know that even though you've checked the code of the job you want to do, you find out that they are on the list of occupational lists. They are on the occupational list. Where the problem will now be is the salary requirement. The salary requirement is now what that will determine if you are going to be given COS or not be given COS. And that salary requirement, I've told you that, is dependent on the three main factors. The minimum standard pay, which is $38,700. Now, it dependent on the type of job. It's not dependent on the going rate of that job. In other words, the going rate of the job has more to say. Are you getting me? Okay, whichever that is high. So sometimes, even though you get a job, that job must meet that minimum standard, which is £38,700. But if the going rate is higher than that, to be eligible, you need to get that going rate. Although there are some exceptions, we are going to get to that point. Each occupation code has its own annual going rate. That is what I want you to note here. So every occupation code has its own annual going rate. So to find out if you are eligible, check the annual going rate of your occupation. That is what I will determine if you are going to be sponsored or not. Bearing in mind of the minimum standard pay, that your going rate, your annual going rate might be higher than the minimum standard pay. Now, check the going rate of your job in the going rate table, so you can do that. Now, if you work in a healthcare or education, there are some few exceptions. But I know why I'm saying this, because when they were talking about the healthcare or education here, it doesn't imply for every healthcare or every education. He said there are different salary rules. If you work in some, the word there is some, so that you work in healthcare does not mean you are eligible to this. So to find out if you're eligible to this, you need to now click healthcare or education job. Now that will now show you if you are eligible or not. Now, what is the eligibility of that? It means that those people that is on that healthcare, every code that is on healthcare or education job, okay, the exception is that instead of £38,700, the exception is that they can actually be sponsored, provided that they can earn at least £23,200 a year. And this is where things like support worker, home care worker comes in, like a healthcare assistant, support worker, like I've said, that people that work in a mental unit and so on. So now, and that is where that change is made. So even if we are talking about the minimum standard pay, if you belong in this healthcare or education job, some of those professions that are in this healthcare or education jobs, you can actually be sponsored, provided that you can get at least £23,200 a year. So you now see that is exception. But the point I want to make, the video I'm making now has to do with biomedical scientists. Unfortunately, biomedical scientists, when I check, is not on this code, is not on this link. So you can confirm it, but when I check it, 2113 is not there. So that means that they are not eligible to get COS, even if they get job that can pay them more than £23,200. I hope that makes sense. Still on the salary requirement, we now need to look at the going rate for these jobs are based on the national pay. So now what it means is that the Home Office make these changes of some of this healthcare and the education based on the fact that the going rate of their job is going to be based on the national pay scale. So they base that decision on the national pay scale, not on the going rate. So what it means is that some people, instead of the going rate, what the Home Office use is a national pay scale that is set by the relevant independent bodies such as NHS. So NHS have their payment scale. So in that their national payment scale, okay, the Home Office now say, okay, if your profession is on that list, remember, if your profession is on that list that I've just previously highlighted, okay, of some of the healthcare or education, if your profession is on that list, the Home Office said they are not going to be looking at the going rate. They are going to be looking at the national pay scale, not on the going rate. That's just the difference. But unfortunately, like I said, when I check, biomedical scientist is not there. If biomedical scientist job is there, what would have happened is that that going rate will no longer be applicable to us, okay? What will be applicable to us, it would have been the national pay. But unfortunately, it's not there. So what is applicable to us is the going rate. I'm trying to explain the minimum wage, the minimum standard pay of 38,700 and the going rate and the national pay scale. So the changes of the people that can get at least 23,200 is based on some of the people, some of the healthcare and education profession that the Home Office decided to ignore the going rate and go by the national pay. And like I've said, biomedical scientist is not there. Now, you can view the list of the eligible healthcare education job, you know, by looking at this, okay? Now, and like I've said, unfortunately, 2113 code is not there. And that 2113 talks about biochemists and biomedical scientists. That appear missing there. I didn't see it. You can double check. So because it's not there, it means that the Home Office will not be going with the national pay scale. They are going to be going by the going rate. I hope that makes sense, okay? Now, when you can be paid less, there are some situations where you can be paid less as well. You can explore the information. I didn't look at it, okay? I didn't look at the options. But one of the things I do see there is that maybe if you have PhD or something like that, okay, maybe you can get, you can be eligible to be paid less and still get sponsored. So I would recommend that you explore that. Check and see if you are eligible. Now, let us look at the skilled worker visa salary list, because now we know that the problem is now based on the salary. That's where the problem is now. So we now know the minimum wage, the minimum standard pay, that's 8,700. We now know that it's not just that. It's not just that. We also need to make sure that the going rate, okay, is, you know, is that the job we're getting, the job we've gotten to be sponsored, we also need to consider the going rate of that very job. That is why I say that you usually should be paid at least 38,700 pounds, or the going rate of the type of job you are doing, whichever that is high. Now let's see that. So you can see this is actually for biomedical scientists, okay? So you see we have 2113, which is our code, 2113. And look at the standard going rate for us is 44,800 pounds a year. The lower going rate for us is 36,700 pounds a year. See where the problem is. The Home Office put a statement that they say you should usually be paid 38,700 pounds a year, or the going rate, whichever that is higher. So if we should pay usually 38,000 pounds, if you look at the going rate here, our lower going rate here is okay, but it's 36,700 pounds, meaning that it is lower. It is lower than the standard payment. The standard payment is 38,700 pounds a year. So because this is lower, even if you are offered this 36,700 pounds, you may not be sponsored. Let me use that word. You may not be sponsored, okay? Why wouldn't you be sponsored even if you get 36,700? You will not be sponsored because the Home Office said you should usually be paid at least 38,700 pounds a year, or your going rate, whichever that is higher. So because the minimum wage, the standard payment is higher than this 36,700 pounds, this will not be eligible. Okay, but assuming you get something of 44,800 pounds, that is where it says the minimum standard pay of £38,000 or your going rate, whichever that is higher. So on this occasion, assuming you get £44,800 pay, so you can be guest sponsor. Why? Because it is more than £38,700, which is a standard pay. I hope that makes sense. So when you are looking at this as a biomedical scientist, what does this mean? It means that you are looking for a biomedical scientist job that can pay you at least £38,700 a year, not this £36,700. Because if you get £36,700, your going rate, whichever that is higher. So if you compare this £36,700, okay, with £38,700, £38,700 is higher. Therefore, whichever that is higher is £38,700, and that is why if you get this, you are not going to be eligible. So you should be looking at something at least £38,700 a year. I hope that makes sense. Now, let us look at the NHS paid band, because this will help to put what I want to say into context, okay? So now, there are lists. You can see the band or equivalent there. You can look at the England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So I'm going to be focusing on England, okay? Now, in England, you're going to see that for band 5, you're looking at the starting point is £28,407. Again, it's not up to £38,700. Band 6, £35,392. Again, not up to £38,700. The one that is at least more than £38,700 is band 7. So that seems to suggest from this that you should be looking at something like from band 7 position. But that is not really the whole truth. What is here is that each of the band has payment points. So what we are showing here is a starting point. So meaning that you can actually be eligible if you get band 6. Unfortunately for band 7, for band 5, I don't think you can ever get up to £38,000. But for band 6, you can actually get up to £38,000 if paid at a particular point that can accommodate that £38,000. Now let's see that. Still on the payments, pay band scales, you can see for band 5, like I've said, unfortunately, you are going to see 28,407 up to 34,581. So it's not even up to the standard payment. I hope that makes sense, which is 38,700 pounds. So that may not be your best option, to be honest. So the options you should be looking at is something like band 6, at least band 6, which you can get from 35,932 up to 42,618. That means if you do get a band 6, you are now need to find a way to negotiate your way to see if they can pay you a point in between that can be at least 38,700 pounds. And obviously, if you do get band 7, of course, you are going to pass 38,700 pounds. So the point I want to make is this, which is actually why I say note at least 38,700 pounds per year is the standard pay. Then he said, or the going rate, whichever that is higher. So what it means, everything you are going to be paid must be at least 38,700 pounds or anything that is higher. So what it then means is that even if your going rate, if your minimum going rate, remember we have standard going rate, okay, then we have the minimum going rate. Now, if the minimum going rate is more than 38,700 pounds, even if you get a job that is 38,700 pounds, you cannot be eligible. But why we are not talking about that in biomedical scientist position is because our minimum going rate is 36,700 pounds. So that's why we're not even talking about it. If the minimum going rate happens to be more than 38,700 pounds, even if you get 38,700 pounds, you wouldn't have been sponsored. But anyway, our minimum going rate is 36,700 pounds, meaning that what you should be focusing is to get a job that can pay you at least 38,700 pounds. I hope that makes sense. Now, let me bring a conclusion to us. Before I bring, I'm going to say that from what I have said, you can see that all hope is not actually lost. What you need to do now is to work very hard to see if you can get band 6 position, okay, that can actually pay you a particular point that can be up to, that can be more than 38,700 pounds, okay. Now, another thing I want to say there is this. I know that some of us, maybe you are on postgraduate visa, or as the case may be, or you are studying, and it appears that you are panicking. The solution is not panicking now. what I would suggest is this. If you are on postgraduate visa and you get band 5 position, take the position. Use your postgraduate visa to work. You have 2 years, so you can use it to work at least 6 months, 8 months, or even 1 year. That way you can now have experience, and that can help you to compete with in the market and get band 6 position that can pay you at least £38,700. And like I've said, you never know. Home Office might still need to look at their policy and decide to review it, before your postgraduate visa elapses. But the point I want to say here is that don't give up. I understand that some of you guys have stopped applying for biomedical scientist job. That is not the way forward. If you have a visa that you can use to work, like postgraduate study visa, use it and do the band 5 or even the band 6 at the beginning rate, at the beginning point. Okay, use it and be working, and see that once you have experience, and if you are very good, what will happen? The organization will find a way to pay you a point that can help them to sponsor to give you COS. Okay, so that will be my general advice on that. Okay, so that means that I will say, please be strong and be courageous. This is not a time to be panicked. This is a time to find a solution in the midst of this whole challenges, as it were. Okay, so what you need to do is to find a way, make use of the challenges and see how the challenges can bring out the best in you. So I would say, please be strong and courageous. Don't give up. Please don't give up. If you give up, that is where the problem is. And that will lead me to my next point, that if you go for interview, you will need to be extremely good during your interview. That can help the organization to see how they can be able to accommodate to pay you something that can help them to sponsor you. I hope that makes sense. Now, I have said that if you really want to get sponsored now, if you don't want to take band 5, you really want to get sponsored, that means you need to really be very good during the interview, and you should be going for band 6 position, and you should be able to negotiate to see if they can pay you a point in band 6 that can help them to give you sponsorship. I hope that makes sense. Okay, but like I've said, if you are not getting the band 6, take band 5. If you have visa to work, like postgraduate visa, use it and work and get experience, and you never know, that can help you too, before that visa elapses, to not get a band 6 that can sponsor you. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now you need to also try to go for a higher band, like I've said. So if you've weighed the options and you find that the way forward is I really need sponsorship now, you might need to consider going for at least band 6, and you might need to consider being so good that you might need to negotiate for them to pay you a point that can get at least £38,700 a year. Okay, and that is what I mean by negotiating the payment point, the pay point. I hope that makes sense. Now, every information I'm giving, because I know that this is very stressful, so what I'm trying to do is to provide explanation where possible. Okay, like I've said, I'm not an immigration lawyer. Okay, maybe you need to just double check the information that I've given and see whether I'm right or wrong. But I've tried to read it because of the question that many of you guys have asked, and the information I've given is what I'm able to come up with. Hopefully that has addressed your concern, but please don't give up. Having said that, someone told me, a colleague mentioned to me, this is subject to confirmation, but I've been told that NHS has published the UK new immigration policy to explain how that impacts NHS and the sponsorship. And from what the person told me, it appears that NHS might know a way around sponsoring someone, even if the person gets a band 5 position. I don't know. What I would say that, please, if you're interested, go and read impact of the changes of the UK immigration policy that NHS published. So if you just type impact of the changes to the UK immigration policies on Google, it will bring what NHS published, and hopefully that can now help you to read, and you can see, maybe, you never know, maybe they publish something that can help them to still sponsor band 5. But from what I've studied or maybe research regarding the information that Home Office have put on their website, I couldn't see that, and the information I provided is what I thought that is what Home Office mean. Like I've said, you don't need to take my word for it. They are all subject for confirmation. But can I ask something else? Because these are new policies, there is a possibility that some of the HR might still be studying this. So if you think that there is a gap in knowledge on what the HR know, you might need to learn how not to be shy, but point them towards what the Home Office has said, if you think that will help them to give you COS. Anyway, that is what I have got for you guys. Hopefully that has been very helpful. Okay, anyway, thank you for listening. Okay, hopefully that has been very helpful. Obviously, let me know what you think about the video, and if you still have anything that is confusing, let me know. Maybe if I read more, I can know more, then I might share with you guys. Okay, I don't make this kind of video. I only make it because I am making videos to support people to get biomedical scientists job. So because some people have now questioned me regarding immigration, current policy regarding biomedical scientists being sponsored, that is why I'm making this video. Okay, but hopefully I've been able to provide information that is helpful. So can I ask you, please subscribe, share, like, and comment. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best till I come your way again. Bye-bye.